Hello everyone, welcome back to my audio class. This is Professor Prasun Banerjee. In this class, I am going to make a brief introductory study of Tennyson's poem, The Lady of Shallot. And this particular class is designed for the undergraduate students of BA Semester 4 of the University of Bartman. One can use this class as a sort of a pre-study before one sets to read the lines of the poem in detail. And here I will try to trace the influences that Tennyson had while writing this poem, the probable sources that he has used, and the techniques that he has adopted in this in this poem. I will also try to make a very brief critical summary of the poem, as well as a critical commentary on this particular poem. The Lady of Shallot was published for the first time in 1833, and it was included in a volume entitled Poems Chiefly Lyrical. It was one of Tennyson's earliest compositions. After having won the Chancellor's Gold Medal for his poem The Timbuktu in 1827, Tennyson felt encouraged to publish a volume of poems containing his solo poems, and he did that in 1833, and the volume of poem was entitled Poems Chiefly Lyrical. Then he decided to republish that particular volume with more poems in 1833, and in that edition he included the first draft of this poem, The Lady of Shallot. He was highly criticized for this particular poem, The Lady of Shallot, because of its gross negligence or gross indifference to the problems of industrial revolution, to the social situation of the contemporary time. And Tennyson was accused for being essentially masculine, for having rejected effeminine's ideology, and he was so discouraged by the criticism that he did not publish again for the next 10 years, although he did continue to write. However, this poem later won many accolades and actually were praised a lot, and it was it was a poem which was sort of responsible for for bringing some sort of fame for Tennyson, which ultimately resulted in his attaining this the post of Poet Laureate of England. Though there are many strong contenders for the post, like Elizabeth Barrett Browning, like Leigh Hunt, but Tennyson finally left them behind to get the post. And this particular post of the Poet Laureate had brought Tennyson great recognition, particularly a lot of backing from Queen Victoria, who was a strong admirer of Tennyson's poetry. So before getting into the poem, we just want to have a very brief biographical study of Tennyson in order to show the kind of subject matter that he has chosen for, and the reasons for the kind of poetry that he has written. Tennyson was born and brought up in a middle class family, and both from his father and mother's side he was associated with institutionalized Christianity. His father, George Clayton Tennyson, was the rector of Somerspy as well as the rector of Bennyworth, and his mother, Elizabeth Fitchie, was the daughter of Stephen Fitchie, vicar of St. James's Church. So Tennyson had great association with a strong association with institutionalized religion, and he was a student of King Edward VI Grammar School, as well as he got admitted in Trinity College, Cambridge. So he had the best of education, best of formal education in England. He became the Poet Laureate of England in 1850 after William Wordsworth's death and Samuel Rogers' refusal, and he held the position until his death in 1892, and it was probably the longest tenure of any Poet Laureate. Tennyson, being in the post of Poet Laureate, Tennyson somehow took up this duty of highlighting the best possible face of England. And in his poetry, we always find a very bright picture of England as both as a progressive nation, as a champion of modern science, as well as one which respects its tradition. And in Tennyson's poetry, will always find a lack of a criticism of the social schemes of the Victorian England, the kind of sufferings that the common people were had after the Industrial Revolution is over, something which find expression in the works of other writers of this period, like Hardy and Dickens in the novels and the poems of other poems. So Tennyson was accused of being carefully oblivious of all those lacunas of the English administrative system, particularly that of the colonial strategies of imperialistic England, which brought great agony to the colonies of the people. And in fact, it is argued that the prosperity of the Victorian England is very much dependent on the tortures and the exploitations that they're doing in the colonies, in their different colonies in the different part of the world, including India. It was because they are drawing materials from the different part of the world that were actually making England rich, that economic boom. Tennyson's poetry was sacredly oblivious of all those elements, and he was chiefly criticized as a rhymester. Tennyson chose to deal with subjects which were from medieval legends to classical myths, and from domestic situations to observations of nature, but his focus was more towards the perfection of the meter. And in fact, he was criticized heavily by Robert Browning as insane and symptomatic of mental infirmity because of his too much fixation with nature, of the rhymed meter. And Tennyson's poem often discloses this particular activity, that often for his poems the meter has come to the center stage and the subject matter has taken a beating. And it is the perfection of meter, it's the mastery of meter that become a sort of fascination, as an obsession for Tennyson, for which he was both criticized as well as praised. There was a sense of melancholia, there is a sense of loss that connects much of his poetry, and in fact T.S. Eliot famously described Tennyson as the saddest of all English poets. And he was chiefly noted for his technical mastery of verse and for his rich language, which many argues that were a sort of an excuse for the lack of genuine sympathy for day-to-day life, for genuine sympathy for the common man, and genuine sympathy for the cause of social justice, that that was kind of absent from Tennyson's poetry. And what he did was highlighting only the cause of the royal family of England. So this was one of Tennyson's criticism. This poem, Lady of Shallot, also deals with a subject matter which is taken from the medieval Arthurian legends, the legend of King Arthur and his Round Table. And one of the main characters of this poem is Sir Lancelot, one of the exalted knights of the Arthurian legend. Sir Lancelot is supposed to have a sort of an affair with Queen Guinevere, the wife of King Arthur, and there are lots of popular stories relating to Sir Lancelot. Tennyson has used those legends and given it a modern tone in this poem, The Lady of Shallot. Now, as I said, this poem was first published in 1833 in a volume entitled Poems Chiefly Lyrical. Many additions and alterations were made subsequently before the poem assumed its present form, which you see now, and it was published in 1842. The poem was immediately followed by similar poems like Sir Lancelot and Guinevere, Sir Galahad and Mortidy Arthur, all of which are based on those medieval Arthurian legends. The story of King Arthur, in fact, greatly fascinated Tennyson's imagination, and these poems are considered to be a sort of a prelude to his great work, that is the Idylls of the King. An Italian romance upon the Donna di Scolata is said to have suggested this poem. this is his immediate source for this poem, Donna Discolata, where the story of a captivated lady who was cursed has been described. And Tennyson adopts another version of in his another poem called Lancelot and Ellen. Tennyson adopts another version of the tale of Lady of Shallot. He has probably taken those poems from those popular legends and myths and has described this. In fact, the two places, one particular place that has been used as a background for this poem is the city of Camelot. Camelot is the ancient city which was believed to be the capital city of King Arthur. Two particular places has been mentioned in this poem, Camelot and Shallot. Two are representative of the two worlds, whereas Camelot represents the active world. Shallot, the island of Shallot, where the lady is captivated, the lady is under captivity, is a representative of the contemplative world. So there is a stream, there is a river which connects Lady of Shallot, the island of Shallot to that of Camelot, and there is a downstream which goes from the river to which goes through the river to the city of Camelot. So the ancient setting of Camelot has been used, but with modern undertones. Now coming to the theme of the poem. The main protagonist of this poem is a lady who is living captive under a house in the island of Shallot. She seems to be living in the house alone, and she is seen in this poem continuously weaving, sitting in front of a mirror. You see many pictures, many pre-Raphaelite paintings of that particular poem, where the lady will be seen as weaving before the painting. And in fact, medievalism and pre-Raphaelitism are two dominant traits that are found in this poetry. Now, as all of you know what medievalism is, the medieval legends and the stories and their inclination towards romance and the story. And now coming to pre-Raphaelitism. Pre-Raphaelite is a movement in painting and poetry that is prominently found in the Victorian time. Dante Gabriel Rossetti is supposed to be a champion of that. And pre-Raphaelites are known for their pictorial representation, for their detailed representation of nature. Tennyson in this poem has been under this influence of both the medievalism and pre-Raphaelitism, and what we find in this poem is a detailed pictorial description of both the city of the scene in the island of Shallot. So this poem has been written under influence of the medieval romances as well as the pre-Raphaelite painting, which at the time were emerging as a distinct mode of painting as well as writing at that time. The poem is divided into 4 parts, and part 1 and part 2 particularly focuses on the scene of the Lady of Shallot, whereas part 3 brings in the character of Sir Lancelot, one who is on board a small boat, and he is sailing towards the city of Camelot, and part 4 gives a conclusion when this curse is broken. So I'm giving you a very brief analysis of summary of the poem. In part 1, the poet describes the situation of the island of Shallot. A lady is found to be there in a house situated in the island of Shallot. It is situated in a river which flows down to the many-towered city of Camelot. On the island lives Lady of Shallot, as I said. Nobody has seen her waving her hand of standing at the window. This Lady of Shallot has only been heard of. Nobody has seen of it. Only the reapers who starts their reaping activity at the early in the morning gets to hear the song of the lady for a while. So while Tennyson is opening the poem, the lady is presented as weaving sitting in front of a mirror. Only reapers reaping early have heard the song of mother. In part 2, this lady is shown as weaving a magic wave day and night. But the lady is weaving standing in front of or sitting in front of a mirror, and she is not allowed as if to look anywhere, anywhere except the mirror. The mirror is placed against the window, and the outside world is getting reflected through the mirror, and the lady is seeing the outside world through the shadows in the mirror, and painting his and weaving her thing with that. So in part 2, the lady is shown as weaving a magic web day and night, and there seems to be a sort of a curse that was on the lady, that if the lady ever chooses to sort of to not to look at the mirror and to look into the world directly outside, a curse is sure to fall on her. In part 3, we see the Sir Lancelot, that famous knight, rides down to Camelot. His bridal bells ring merrily. A silver bugle hangs by his side. His armor flashes in the night. So Sir Lancelot is a wonderful totem or wonderful epitome of the brilliant and the colorfulness of the outside world, from which the lady is secluded. Seeing the beauty of this colorful world reflected through Sir Lancelot, the lady could no longer resist the temptation and decided to leave the mirror and look at the song and look at the world directly herself. The Sir Lancelot is found singing Tira Lira, and in everywhere and from every aspect, as it is shown in part 3 of the poem, Sir Lancelot becomes a symbol of the beautiful but the transient picture of the outside world, that the lady could not resist the temptation and decided to have a look at Sir Lancelot. The moment she does, the mirror gets cracked and the curse has fallen on her. In part 4, the last part, the Lady of Shallot is seen to leave the tower. She is found floating beneath is found floating in a boat along the river, and she rides the Lady of Shallot on the prow, and she looks towards Camelot. Now she is found singing on the boat, and she is described as having died while singing. The poem ends with people talking about this strange lady at the city of Camelot, but nobody really pays any great interest to the lady. The knights at the banquet talks about this lady, and someone is afraid of this strange lady. Only Sir Lancelot thinks a bit about this lady and remarks upon her beauty and prays that God may bless her soul. So the poem ends with Sir Lancelot paying a homage to this lady. Now, regarding this particular poem, Tennyson has made his own commentary. That Tennyson has himself explained the symbolism of the poem as this, I quote, "The newborn love for something." Tennyson describing the idea of the poem in these lines: "The newborn love for something, for someone in the wide world from which she had been so long secluded, takes her out of the region of shadows into that of realities." The lady as if was living in a world of shadows, and then suddenly she decides to leave the world of shadows into the world of reality, and this decision has proved to be a sort of doom for her. And the reason for this decision is that newfound love for the outside world, of which Sir Lancelot is a symbol of. So the poem does tell you a symbolical story where the lady is supposed to be a person who is representing the contemplative world, whereas Sir Lancelot is representing the world of action, and the lady, the mirror, seems to be a representative of the human mind, where the outside world finds a reflection, and what we when we decide to create, we decide to take those images engraved in our own mind, and the moment we face reality, this illusion of the world that we have created through our artworks gets destroyed. So essentially, there is a symbolic undertone of this poem, and this poem can be interpreted in various ways possible. And the element of medieval ballad is prominent here, as well as the element of the pre-Raphaelite painting is very much there. It has the poem is strongly pictorial. It has a picture representation. Not only that, the meter version of this, the meter that has been used in this poem is brilliant. You'll see suddenly the poem moving in fast pace when Sir Lancelot appears, whereas in part 1 and the part 2, when the scene is being described, the pace is quite slow. Tennyson is constantly using commas and to slow down the pace of the poem, where the world of the lady seemed to be unconscious of the passing of time, because he's constantly weaving, whereas the outside world, the world represented by Sir Lancelot, is full of activity and therefore conscious about time. So when this part 3 comes, you will see suddenly the pace of the poem is getting fastened, whereas in initial 2 parts of the poem, the pace is quite slowed down. The poem is remarkable for this brilliant use of meter, for the brilliant use of the words that has been used. And while reading this poem in detail, I'm going to explain them. I'll try to explain them in detail. So Lady of Shallot can be taken as a sort of a kind of representation of the medieval world with a modern outlook, and where the conflict of active life and contemplative life is presented with a sort of ballad-like simplicity. Tennyson has focused more on simplicity, and the poem describes the island of Shallot as well as the city of Camelot as two as a representative of the two aspects of life, that is life of action and life of contemplation. And it can be taken as a brilliant example of what we can call a lyrical ballad, a ballad which is presented in the Thermopylae. Tennyson's lyrical genius is in full view here, and Tennyson has been able to give it the poem the kind of music that he wanted to, relating to his theme of the subject. Tennyson again revises, or I would say relieves, the practice of the romantic poet of taking on any medieval theme and giving it a modern tone. But unlike the romantics, Tennyson's focus is more on matter, on the form, and not on the subject that much. He is focused more on giving this old tale a modern a sort of a modern rendition, and this modern rendition has definitely an appeal to the reader. One cannot miss the beautiful musicality that is hidden within this within the lines of this poem. So with this introduction, we can move on to the next onto the poem directly. We can enjoy the music of the poem with this sort of introduction and with this information. In my next upload, I'm going to read the poem say part by part. As I said, it has total 4 parts, so I'll be reading part 1 in my next upload. Thank you for now. Hello everyone, welcome back to my audio class. This is Professor Prasun Banerjee. In this class, I'm going to make a brief introductory study of Tennyson's poem